Okay.
Do you want him to face accountability for the crimes in Gaza, the bombing, the slaughter of thousands of people?
Of course. And it is brave and right of the International Criminal Court to have indicted him. Absolutely.
And do you see him as an extension of U.S. policy in the region?
No. I see the U.S. as an extension of Netanyahu policy.
You're lucky you're Jewish. They'd call you an anti-Semite.
Well,
what's going on, everybody? Welcome back. I had to share with you Jeffrey Sachs' latest on exposing the destructive alliance between U.S. foreign policy and Netanyahu's leadership, revealing their role in fueling instability and chaos across the Middle East. With a quick focus on the devastation in Gaza, we argue that Netanyahu's actions constitute war crimes, warranting accountability and imprisonment. By dissecting these geopolitical maneuvers, we lay bare how these powers are crippling the world through relentless conflict and ambition.
They can call me anything they want, but I can tell you the truth.
Okay.
And I'll tell you the truth, by the way.
Go ahead.
The truth is that Netanyahu said in 1996, in a book which I recently reread called Fighting Terrorism, he laid out the whole plan. And this is, by the way, quite interesting. It's just advice to any listeners. Usually when there are terrible plans, they don't hide them. Hitler wrote Mein Kampf. And I'm not meaning to make simplistic comparisons. I'm just making the point that people say what they're going to do.
Right.
And in a different sphere, and again, please don't misunderstand, because every time you say one, then it's a kerfuffle that people misunderstand. But Netanyahu wrote in 1996 his plan for how he was going to make Israel safe. Brzezinski wrote in 1997 a different book called The Grand Chessboard of how he was going to make the United States the world's unipolar power. So they write the story, and you can go back and evaluate. Did they know what they're talking about? Are they full of BS? Did they cause a lot of trouble? So just on 2 points, Brzezinski in 1997 says the U.S. can expand NATO. Russia will have no choice but to accede. What's Russia going to do? Is it going to become an ally of China? No way, says Brzezinski. You know, okay, interesting. Didn't quite get that one right, Zbig. So that's one idea.
Right.
Netanyahu has a different idea, and it's coherent, but it's kind of madness. His idea is, we captured the Palestinian lands in 1967, and we're never going to give them back. There are really two schools of thought in Israel of the extremists. I don't think Netanyahu, I don't know what his religious views are. Actually, I don't care. But anyway, he says, I'm not going to give it back because it would be unsafe for Israel to give it back. So we're just going to rule over the Palestinians. There's a second take which says we're not going to give it back because God in the year 700 BC or in the year 1000 BC, but written in a book, the book of Joshua in the year 700 BC, told us it's ours. And there are people that absolutely believe that as well. Both of them are now in an alliance in this most extremist Israeli government. But going back to 1996, Netanyahu spells out very clearly the following story. He says, we're going to keep the land. There will be resistance. Hamas, Hezbollah, other militant resistance. What will we do about it? You can't really fight the terrorists, he says. You have to fight the states that back the terrorists.
And Iran is the central one in his mind.
But interestingly for Netanyahu, he lays out one by one, yes, of course, Iran is the central one in his mind, but so too is Iraq under Saddam. He supported Hamas.
Right.
So too is Bashar al-Assad in Syria. So too is Somalia. So too is Muammar Gaddafi in Libya. So too is the government in Sudan.
So you see one by
so
one.
So too in Lebanon.
Right.
You know, he laid it out, and he at various times listed the countries. And one list that showed up in the Pentagon just after 9/11 was 7 countries: Iran, Iraq, Lebanon, Syria, Somalia, Sudan, and Libya. And you know what the plan was? 7 wars in 5 years. And is this the U.S. using Israel. No, no, no. This is Israel using the U.S. as if our military is in their hands, which in effect it is. You take Wolfowitz and you take Feith and you take these neocons and you take Netanyahu. They game planned the whole thing out. Well, I regard Netanyahu as having been our greatest disastrous president of the 21st century because he ran American foreign policy for 20 years and he cost us trillions of dollars. And where is the Middle East today? War in Syria, war in Lebanon, war in Palestine, unrest in Iraq, the war in Yemen, chaos in Sudan, chaos in Somalia, chaos in Libya. Great job, Bibi. You did a terrific job. So this is, to my mind, what this is all about. These people have ideas. These ideas are absolutely dangerous.
And we're running out of time, so I want to keep this brief. But you're not willing to accept Netanyahu's justification for what he's doing in Gaza. You're not willing to accept that he's fighting Hamas and he's fighting terrorism.
By the way, what I believe in since Resolution 242 in the fall of 1967 is a state of Palestine living aside a state of Israel.
So you want a two-state solution.
Yeah.
You're not willing to take Netanyahu's justifications for massacres and war crimes, possibly even genocide. Why does it seem as if you're willing to take the justifications of Putin vis-a-vis Ukraine, of
because
China,
I know what
China and Xinjiang and the Uyghurs, of Bashar al-Assad saying he's fighting terrorism while he's barrel bombing Syrian people? Why are you so partial to their justification but not Netanyahu's?
First of all, because I know that most of these things like Xinjiang is Western blah, 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 blah narrative.
But what do you mean by that?
What I mean by that is that there are tens of thousands of people being slaughtered in Gaza, and there is not even one story about murders in Xinjiang.
But you'd accept some bad things are happening.
It could be bad things, but to call that a genocide and to be making an actual genocide in Gaza is a game of Western narratives. You take our current story in the United States of China, the war like China. How many wars has China been in the last 40 years? Let me count them. That would be zero, not one war in 40 years. When was the most recent war that China was in? January 16 to February 16, 1979. 1 month in a conflict with Vietnam, which had to do actually with Vietnam having overthrown a government in Cambodia. Okay, 1 month. We are not at dire risk from China. China is not mass murdering its population. But we are gearing up in the United States for war with China. Why? Well, once again, people actually wrote why. You have to know where to look, but if you look at the Council on Foreign Relations, an article by a former colleague of mine, Robert Blackwell and Ashley Tellis, in 2015, they say that China has become so powerful that it threatens American primacy. And China's rise is no longer in America's interest. And so you watch this mentality in the U.S. go into effect. Suddenly, because China's economically successful, they're not just economically successful, they're the enemy. Right. So everything becomes rhetoric. In the case of Ukraine, which I have followed from 1990 as advisor not only to Mikhail Gorbachev and advisor to Yeltsin, but also advisor to President Leonid Kuchma of Ukraine. I was advising the Ukrainian government in 1994. I'm not against Ukraine in any way. I'm against using Ukraine and Ukrainians being slaughtered by the hundreds of thousands because the United States wants to move another piece on the board to have its military bases on the border of Russia. And why, by the way? Because again, there's a whole telltale line of reasoning. Just like the Soviet Union broke up, we can induce Russia to break up along ethnic lines. This is a meme of Washington. These people are out of their minds to be provoking us towards nuclear war this way.
Professor Jeffrey Sachs, we didn't even get to talk about the world economy. Maybe next time.
I hope we
focus on
can
that.
sometime.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks a lot.
Much appreciated.
As we conclude, it's clear that both US and Israeli policies have played pivotal roles in perpetrating conflict and instability in the Middle East. Netanyahu's outlined strategies and the US subsequent military actions have led to immense suffering, particularly in Gaza, not to mention provoking China on the other end. It's time to start holding leaders accountable for war crimes and recognizing how these geopolitical agendas are crippling the world. Stay tuned as we continue to uncover these truths and challenges, and challenge the narratives driving global chaos. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and join the discussion down below here at Zees Political Arrow.